So, I have a bit of a problem. Apparently, my character is a psychopath, and people and Mr. Mindflayer can attest to the fact that he is a psychopath. My question to you and the experienced writers here would be, at what point do you guys just say, okay, I don't want to follow this guy anymore? I'm not sure I want to complete this book. Because, above all else, I want your money and your fandom. I much rather have your fandom than your money, if I'm being honest with you. So, what's your tolerance here? Like, are
Well,
you guys like,
the first book, the Revenant and the Tomb was actually my second attempt at writing a standalone book with that character. The first attempt, I didn't have a story in the middle, so I just scrapped it. So, which I'm probably going to go back and revisit now that I have some better ideas. But
Oh
if,
yeah, I remember your book.
if your character is not likable, that nobody's going to read the book.
well,
Unless they're unlikable characters constantly having things just
Well-
backfire in their face, like Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
even if
that's
they're a psychopath, they still have to be likable on
There-
some
there has-
level.
yeah.
Foil there. There has to be a foil to the psychopath, and typically that's why they're used in buddy stories, because the psychopath is usually paired up with a person that's not psychopathic.
Like your
they-
good cop, bad cop scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, and so and also we ask, is the person actually psychopathic or are they sociopathic? A sociopath usupsycally has
Well-
a backstory change in the way they can grow or they can become more functional. The psychopath is actually born with this predilection. It seemingly just arises out of its own self, and as a result, you really don't have that sympathy. Like if your sociopath has some sympathy, you can take them in that right direction, or you can have them to garner some sort of audience with that. But a person that simply does terrible things to people randomly has to have a foil somewhere to be likable. Have to have something that brings them into that level of people wanting to know more about them, instead of just being afraid of reading that next chapter is just too horrible.
Yeah.
Just wrecking
Sure.
things.
I have
The
questions
reason
for
why-
you.
Well, hang on. There's a reason why they have a protagonist and an antagonist.
Yeah.
And you almost always follow the antagonist unless you're like writing an origin story for or that's why you always follow the protagonist unless you're writing a story for creation of an antagonist, which I don't, almost every book that I've ever read that has a lot of people reading it has a good guy.
Even
So-
well, you
even
know
in
what?
books
This
that
is-
I've read where the main character is a piece of shit, usually the bad guy is an even bigger piece of shit.
Yeah. So-
Almost always, yeah.
Like
Like a Joe
Riddick.
Abercrombie novel.
Ooh, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
Abercrombie.
Stormcoat, you've read him?
I've
So you
read
know.
the entire trilogy, which is
There is
why,
not- Yeah.
that's my question. I read the whole trilogy. There's none of those main characters are good guys, but I love reading
Nope.
about them.
That's that whole shades of gray thing.
And
Yeah.
I
you know
do
what?
think he does it better than George R.R. Martin, but
Yes, he does.
I was very upset at the end of that trilogy, man.
I was not
like-
actually. You know what? That's the opposite of the Dark Tower with me, because the trilogy did not set up like a resolution that the Dark Tower promised us. Like the ending of that trilogy is perfect for that story. That's one thing. The other thing, Miss Snow, to
Yeah.
give you an idea, my main character, he has two best friends, and that's all he has. And one of the things he does in the backstory is, okay, have you ever seen the movie Carrie?
Yes, parts of it.
You know the bullies then.
Yes.
All right, imagine that kind of bully that does that to that kind of girl. What my main character does to that kind of bully is that he stalks that bully to the girl's bathroom, waits for her to be alone, and then ambushes her and carves her face up to get her to stop bullying, essentially.
So in this case,
Okay.
if you're taking that story towards that point and you're saying, okay, so this is a revenge story, then there has to be that sympathy there for the character. And if you're talking about a wider audience, now you'll have people that'll read stuff like that. I mean, there's an audience for everything.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so always be true to the vision you've got. But if you're wanting that sympathy, you have to say, that's that point. Why does he feel like this person's a bully? Why is he doing these things? Loki is a character that people frequently point to as a sort of a sociopathic or psychopathic character. And if that Loki, what is it that makes Loki likable? Because he has sympathy. We have sympathy for the fact of where he comes from and why he's the way he is. That he could be a big villain as well. Actually, he's not done that way in the Disney universe, but in the actual mythos of Loki, he becomes the villain from a trickster and destroys the entire universe. And so that's one of the reasons his arc is so compelling, because he actually has that sympathy of why he did what he did and how he ends up being what he is. And so you would almost have to be able to sort of tie it together. But so since he's after bullies, the question is, you sort of have to say, why is he that way? And is he over the top with it? Is he?
Yeah. It's funny. Mr. Mindflayer is basically my co-author in this, because I'm using my character that I created for his setting in our tabletop. And he told me, hey, and the reason why he did that to the girl, right, is because the girl was like basically torturing this burn victim who got orphaned, right? And the main character, who was also an orphan, did not at all like what she was doing. Basically, the bullied this poor girl so much that she put her in her room for a week and did not come out. And he said, you know what? If the faculty is not going to take care of this, you know what? I got to do this permanently. And basically, he saw that this bully was really shallow, very arrogant. Basically, Amber Heard. I wanted to see Amber Heard get her face cut up, and so I wrote her as a bully into my story. And there it is. I carved her face up, gave her a good old-fashioned Joker smile.
Well, Andrew Campbell says, what's the hook of the story? What's the message, themes, etc.? What's the selling pitch on the story that can fit onto the back of a book?
Yep.
Oh, that's easy. Imagine a Master Chief was a schizophrenic psychopath, and he had to fight aliens.
That's an idea, but I think Andrew is asking about the deeper stuff.
What is going to draw your potential readers into buying that book? What is going to make you say, "Oh, that sounds like something cool to read"? I could spend an hour or two just whiling away the hours, just reading through this and seeing what happens.
Yeah, that is true. I'm literally just going off on everything I can think of and writing it down. I'm not good at book blurbs yet, I'm sad to say.
I think that's the toughest part to write, personally. Well, R.H. Snow, since we brought up, you're actually the right person for me to ask.
Uh-oh.
And it has to do with the difference between psychopath and sociopath. Now, the way I always understood it, and I'm starting to get the idea I've understood incorrectly, was that psychopaths are nut jobs that love to hurt people, and sociopaths are people who don't really have much sense of emotion.
Sociopaths don't have much sense of, actually they have emotion, because we've all known sociopaths really off the deep end. Sociopaths, the word socio, it's against society in general. They have a tendency to break the rules. In fact, the current interpretation of the DVM is that they break the rules of society. They don't follow society's rules. They overturn.
Am I a sociopath?
Many people, but well, that's the thing. They will continue. They can. It depends on who's writing this. Remember, this is a construct created by people to try to figure out what is happening with certain groups that have a tendency to break laws or what. And so out of this arises the idea of the sociopath, the person who does not follow societal rules. And that can be very broad. You can have a person that follows all the rules of how to make money, but they don't follow the rules of how to be a decent human being to their family or something like that.
Under that umbrella, just someone who's introvert and a shut-in could count as a sociopath.
Yeah, in a certain sense, the path part of it is actually what it is. Rather than just turning away from society and doing their own thing, a sociopath, as opposed to a sociophobe, tries to actively do something that will actually cause that structure to be dismantled somehow. And that also revolutionaries. Now, I was going to say,
so revolutionaries would fall into that category.
Yes, they would fall into that in a certain way. They would say, you're a sociopath. You're trying to take apart everything we love. Well, but at the same time, they will have a set of rules that they may follow.
But then Sherlock Holmes claims he's not a psychopath. He's a high-functioning sociopath.
That is right. And in this case, we have Yes, he's a sociopath. He is breaking the rules. He actually goes in and breaks the rules of how you do an investigation or how you do certain things, and he creates his own rules. And they will follow those rules until such time as they aren't able to break the rules anymore. And then they'll say, I need to break the rules because I don't.
Kind of like Bullock in Batman. He's a
Yes.
cop that's like always bending and breaking the rules to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like, don't let the law stand in the way of justice. If,
Yes.
if the law cannot fulfill justice, then justice needs to be taken away from the curfew of the law.
That whole point of the Punisher, they consider him, and many people will suddenly say, well, he's sociopathic because he's breaking the laws of society to attain vengeance or justice. And so you have the sociopath is breaking rules in order to do what they believe is the right thing to do, or to serve themselves. If they believe the right thing to do is for them to be on the top of the heap, that's what turns a sociopath into a villain. Is when they no longer care what happens to other people because their rule has to apply. When you have a psychopath, the only thing that matters is hurting people. Eventually, it will somehow come down to that. Psychopaths almost rarely, if ever, are able to really function in society very well because eventually they're going to harm people that support them and care for them. Sociopath will harm people, but will make it sound like it's a good idea.
So a narcissist could be a passive-aggressive psychopath.
Correct. So they can be a passive-aggressive psychopath, especially in its most extreme forms. A narcissist certainly could be. That's psychopathic, that you hate everyone but yourself. Psychopaths have no compunction about whom they hurt. They do it just because you can. A sociopath is probably moving towards that. They believe they have a good reason. They are dismantling something they believe shouldn't exist, whether it's something good like a family or they had a bad experience with their father yelling at them, so they hate all fathers, and they'll go out and they'll just tear apart a family or kill a man because he's a dad. That's an extreme sociopathic tendency, but there's a thinking behind it. The psychopath enjoys simply harming anywhere.
So a character like, for example, Dexter, he doesn't feel anything at all except when he's killing somebody. That's the only time he can feel anything.
He's a psychopath. He's a psychopath.
That's a psycho?
Yeah.
I believe he's a psychopath because yeah. And I have never watched Dexter. I have
no. He does have feelings and shit.
Well, that's what I was saying. He should have some sort of emotion, but he probably feels his kind of emotion in killing somebody.
He does, but he also kind of gains an emotion for the girlfriend and her children.
Yeah.
And then the show got really shitty after that.
Well, no, I got shitty after the fucking season 4.
Well, that's what I meant. Yeah.
When they kill his girlfriend.
I read something about some psychologist wrote a paper about the character Dexter and saying, this is not what a serial killer is. This is what we wish a serial killer was.
Oh, it's a fantasy straight up. Yeah.
Yes, it's a fantasy saying, well, what if this guy killed all the people we think should be killed? And if I'm not mistaken, in the story, Dexter, he's doing a job nobody else will do, basically. He's killing the bully. Is that correct?
That his father trained him to turn his psychopathic behavior of wanting to hurt others, and he trained him to basically hunt only other people like himself, other killers,
and people he knows that committed the crime. He 100% knows did it.
Yeah, he wants shadow of a doubt gone before he makes that move. And it's weird, even though he was as unfeeling as he always came across as, that one guy he got on his table to do the killing deed, and it was a criminal. He knew it, and he just couldn't bring himself to do it because he was blind and he didn't understand why. It made no sense to him. He was like looking around confused. I think he was feeling something, didn't understand what. And then dropped the knife down into the table next to him and said, let that be a lesson to you, and then set him free.
Well, and I think this is the thing about Dexter, and that's that fantasy. And so really, if he's not there just to hurt somebody, if he's there because there's a particular point that he's following, but he is channeling that psychopathy into a certain point, he had to at some point listen to his father, which means that he is probably not a pure psychopath. He is a sociopath. He's listening to one person. He has some sort of rule that guides him towards that thing. And in fact, this is a big point in Watcher the Damned, is that the Watcher actually is a very high functioning sociopath. And his history is something, I've never watched Dexter before, but there is something of that same level in Watcher the Damned, of a very high functioning sociopath that kills men who need killing. That's his job. That's what he does. And he always has He's a
I-
villain.
He was,
I have a
he was
question,
made into a
sorry.
sociopath by an incident at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, and so that
You
is
know
that
what?
sociopathic in that
I'm,
respect.
I'm sorry. You know what? This is actually a very important question for me then. Well, for
Okay.
this. So, trauma. How, okay. My biggest thing right now is that I do not want to do, the good old fashioned Angie. Oh, he had a horrible backstory, therefore that makes him sympathetic, or this is okay. Let me rephrase. How do you use a traumatic backstory in a good way to it makes sense why they turned out this way, essentially?
Well, it's almost always associated with trauma and usually a head injury. So a
Yeah,
way
and-
to incorporate
and
both those things is a
Hold
smart
up,
way to go.
hold up. Goku didn't turn out like that. So fuck you, Christian.
Yeah, really.
Well,
by the way,
I
Christian,
didn't
you were
turn
about
out
to
like
say
that
something a
either.
moment ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like, how do I explain this? I think there are justified times when you have to take another human life. I think there are things that justify that. And I don't
Petals.
think someone doing that makes them a sociopath.
Yeah.
So where do you guys stand on that?
Oh, that's
there's-
easy.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's easy.
Andrew
Oh, that's
Campbell.
easy. Pedos, all of them. Kill them all. I don't care.
In Minecraft.
Kill all the pedos.
In
In Minecraft.
Justifiable
That's a great
homicide.
point.
Justifiable
Yeah, sure.
homicide is actual
Killing
things.
those zombies.
Yes.
In Minecraft is
Yeah.
Sure.
Just like when
Yeah,
Bubba shot the
Minecraft.
jukebox.
Yeah, Bubba shot the jukebox last night is justifiable homicide. Justifiable homicide is when you're in fear of your own life or you're protecting innocent life. When you're doing it within that parameter, that's not sociopathic because that has been societally throughout the eons. If you're protecting yourself or protecting somebody else who is innocent, that is not just that's not sociopathic behavior. That's normal behavior.
Okay, so that makes more sense
Well,
now.
defending your home and shit. That's why I
Yeah.
love my state castle doctrine, bitches.
Yeah, oh, that's it. And so you have, we've actually gotten so divorced from reality in our society that we've stopped thinking that people should be allowed to protect themselves. So that's not sociopathic. That is normal behavior to say that I have a reason to kill this person in defense of my life or other life. Now, as you move
That makes
away,
sense. Yeah.
Most instances when people do that, they were probably trying not to.
yeah, that is
Yeah.
true. They actually
Because our instinct is to not do that for the most part.
Mhm.
So most cases, if someone's doing that, it's a forced hand, unless they're just nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like in my own situations when I was younger, I used to get in a lot of fights and was kind of just dumb shit. But then I got older and I'm like, I don't. If I get in a fight with someone or if I even react to someone the wrong way, just look at me, man. Look at me. They'll send me straight to jail. So like when I had a domestic situation like 3 or 4 years ago, I was just like, all right, well, I guess this thing happened, and that's kind of just how that has to go.
Yeah, it's really tough because in this case, anything domestic, put your hands in the air, back up, walk out the door because they're going to put you in jail if you touch each other. You have to leave.
Even if you don't.
Yeah, even if you don't, that's true, and you have to just move out as quickly as possible. Bye, see you. You don't. It's not simping to tell another person I don't need you.
I'd rather just stay married another 2 years, but that's just me.
I've been there, so I understand. Like, it's really hard to know what is societally acceptable, and that's where what some people will say it's sociopathic to defend yourself, or when is it not really self-defense? You were just mad, or maybe they said something that really you feel like deserved that response and it didn't. Then you're starting to move into is it sociopathic or not? I killed a man.
Well,
because
society changes, so like how that by definition would change. What is considered sociopathic?
Sociopathic, he looks at me funny. Something that was, I think that, that a person would reasonably say under fair societal rules. And let's look at that and say, what is actually fair? Because it changes once again from year to year. But we look
with
at
the culture.
Yeah, in different cultures. And so it pays to know where you are and what's going on. There's some places where insulting a man's mom could get you killed. There's Westerns. If you want to know what might be considered sociopathic, read the Westerns of Louis L'Amour.
Yeah.
Um, and say, okay, the hero almost always will go to a certain point and then no further. Even in Owen Wister's seminal book, the Virginian, Horseman of the Northern Plains, Western Plains, he actually is describing the first time we see the Western hero. And if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do so. It's can be a little bit of a slog because the language is different, but it adequately describes what does the Western hero look like. And even through the decades, this really hasn't changed much. He has a justifiable homicide he has to do, and there are questions about, is this correct? A man stole a horse. Under the law, you were stealing a man's horse. You were stealing his ability to live or even be able to stay alive. And
yeah,
so
death sentence.
And he has to do this act, and there's a debate about it. When is it justifiable to kill another person? And he does it. He does it because that's his job, and he has to do what he's going to do. This doesn't change much over the course of decades. So I would say in order to really get a grasp of what that is, usually the way it was is that the hero would never willingly hurt a woman or kill them. He might push them down or do something, but he wasn't going to,
slap them around a little,
Yeah, he wouldn't knock them into the, in the next week, break their neck or something. The hero typically wouldn't do that to children. If somebody looked like they were aggressive towards innocent people, older people, or something like that, the hero would step in between, and he would kill somebody that might try to harm someone else. But they usually wouldn't. A great example is John Wayne and the Alamo. They're having a street fight.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Yeah, and so John Wayne literally is over there just smacking these guys around. No, they're actually trying to fight him. They're trying to help him. Literally takes Jim Boy's knife, knocks him in the head, knocks him out, and then just leaves him in the dirt.
Snow, you also got an example of the Rifleman.
Oh, yes. I love The Rifleman. An excellent show.
Yeah.
And go ahead and give us that.
No, I was just mentioning it.
I love
Billy
Rifleman.
Bob, come on. Bring it in.
Yeah. No, it's because that is the classic Western hero. And I think if we look towards that when we're trying to define what it is we really believe, because the rules keep changing, and in fact they change faster and faster now. There's no way to keep up with how the rules are changing now. So when we talk about the Iron Age and we say, what do we want to base our idea of what the hero is, what this sociopathic hero is, we have a lot of examples of the sociopathic hero, of the loner, of the high functioning sociopath or iconoclastic hero, who just goes his own way and does his own thing and then rides off into the. Shane is probably an excellent example of that borderline sociopathic hero. He kills for a living. He does what he needs to do. He comes in, rides in, saves the day, and then does the right thing. There's
House MD.
A lot of noir heroes could be like main characters could fall into that category too.
Absolutely. Mike Hammer's another great in the gray area of pulp fiction heroes. Conan the Barbarian, actually some people consider him sociopathic because he has a tendency to go kill stuff. But that
was the norm. That was kind of like what the world was.
But you look at Robert Howard is speaking about this from a early 20th century viewpoint, mid 20th century viewpoint. He actually codifies that for us as to what would be considered the noble barbarian. And so we see in those actions what is considered
Wolfgar.
to be. So I think that if we look to that, we say there's a line, and it's really hard to define by today's standards because you're no longer allowed to even protect yourself. You can be considered sociopathic for a microaggression. We have to go back.
I still don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
it's fucking fake.
Well, it's the opposite of the macro, okay?
Yeah, it's easily definable by anybody's definition, and it changes from day to day, and it's deliberately that way. So you can't ever know what you're doing wrong.